Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Herold here on Badlands Media. I'm your host, Jon Herold, and happy Wednesday. Today is Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. Man, it's been one of those days. We have plenty to talk about today. The intelligence community heads are all doing a hearing today. I think it was like on World's Threats or something, and there's some interesting back and forth in there, some clips I want to go through. We also have a new story from Just the News. Yes, Bass Burns, I did see that. We will go over that. And it's very much in line with one, stuff that we already knew, and two, stuff we already expected to come. Like it's almost like a rerun, and we'll talk about that. Yes, happy hump day. Get your popcorn out. It says, don't forget to smash that like button. Yes, I would appreciate it if you guys would hit that thumbs up. It's always appreciated. I don't know if I have a new. Did I forget to download it? I think I forgot to download the new soft disclosure ad. I should probably do that real quick. Yeah, how's your guys' day going? I'm seeing a lot of back and forth with the whole Joe Kent resigning yesterday. The social media influencer wars are taking both sides of that, and it's interesting. He is going to be interviewed by both Mark Levin and Tucker Carlson. And that is very exciting to me. So I don't know when those interviews are going to be, but they're going to be probably pretty soon. All right, so I'm just kind of stalling myself while I get this new soft disclosure ad in here. Oh, shoot, where'd I put it? There it is. All right. Okay. Cece says, I'm going to drink the last pop unless you object. No, you go for it. Bass Burns says, I saw a War Room segment today with John Solomon. He mentioned the fact that D&I goes on defense in the hearing instead of showing the receipts we have. Offense needs to be shown. Yeah, I do want to cover a little bit of that Bannon segment as well, because John Solomon on Bannon was pretty good. And he said a lot of interesting things, not just about the Tulsi Gabbard and whatnot, but just the Trump administration generally. So we'll talk about that too. Real quick, I'm going to play the soft disclosure ad once it's loaded up in here. Mega Needy says, Hitler caught on video, hand signed Trump, all this leaders, streamers make? What? Can't take my phone, but hugs to all while you're ready for the gym. Have fun at the gym, bunny. Okay, soft disclosure real quick, and then we'll start going through some clips.
Get you some of that beard oil.
Now that I'm alone, got the close-up. Do you see how awesome my beard looks right now?
I use the beard oil every single day, first thing.
Comes out feeling all silky smooth.
I take the dropper and I manually apply the oil directly
hair.
to my mustache.
Nice and, oh man, I love it.
And then I do drops all throughout the hair, and then I just rub it all in. And then I top it off with the tallow stick on the face.
Dude, I feel like I have to grow a beard just to try this beard oil. It sounds
Do it, Jay.
amazing.
It's all from softdisclosure.com, and the best part about it is you will be supporting Badlands Media, Annie from Willow and Farms, and basically 3 of Annie's neighbors. So that's 5 total American companies that you'd be supporting with one purchase.
I have been using the Soft Disclosure scentless beard oil every day after the shower. It looks unkempt, but it feels silky smooth. I want to look a little wild and unapproachable. But for the woman I trust, she'll be like, oh, it's actually kind of soft. He is approachable after all. Otherwise, stay away. And soft disclosure will help you too with that, if that's the very specific vibe you're going for.
That is very specific, yes.
You guys are supporting American businesses when you do that. It's absolutely incredible, and you get a great, great product.
Some good comments in the chat here. Joe Gilmore says he says Solomon's Fine Rugs now on sale. Hilarious. He also says arrest may be coming soon as the new trust the plan, bro. I think both those things go hand in hand. And then Bass Burns says, do you think Cash is Solomon's source still from back in the days of being together in 16, or is he embedded elsewhere getting info? Which way you lean? I've always thought it was Cash Patel, and it was more so because they were both Trump's representatives to NARA while Biden was in office. I don't know if that's the case. He says something interesting on the show with Bannon today where he makes me think maybe it's Tulsi he's been getting the info from. I don't know. But I think to kick things off, let's play a couple of a couple clips from the hearings today. It might just be best to go through all of Tulsi's segment because I think it's pretty darn good. There's a lot in here. And this is our boy, The Storm Has Arrived, who is always clipping the good stuff. We'll listen to it from him. It's about a 4.5 minute segment. I'll probably stop it as we go through when I think there's interesting things, but covers a lot of things, including up to election and whatnot. So take a listen.
Director Gabbard, the whole country knows that you were recently involved in an FBI operation to seize ballots in Fulton County, Georgia. Yet this was despite the fact that the warrant showed no foreign interference or nexus. Matter of fact, the warrant was based entirely on conspiracy theories that have already been examined and rejected repeatedly.
By the way, this is Mark Warner. He is a noted douchebag. Obviously, he's going over the Fulton County thing that everybody freaked out about. What was it, a month and a half ago? I don't even remember when that was. It was a little while ago, though, and questioning her involvement.
Now, where is the authority for you?
Oh, and happy birthday to Rocky 2021. It was his wife's birthday, so happy birthday to your wife, my friend.
To involve yourself in a domestic law enforcement activity?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. I appreciate the question. As you know, I've addressed every issue you've raised in detail in a letter, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to do it in this forum. As you stated, Congress provided by statute, ODNI, with the responsibility of election security and counterintelligence in 2021. As you also know, ODNI has purview and oversight.
Could you, I know the history very well, but could you just
I am addressing the question. ODNI also has purview and overview over two domestic related agencies, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, both of which have purview over election security responsibilities to ensure the integrity of our elections. I want to correct one of your statements that you've made multiple times, which is false. I did not participate in a law enforcement activity, nor would I, because that does not exist within my authorities.
You were present on the scene. Are the photos of you on the scene false?
I was at Fulton County, sir, at the request of the president, and to work with the FBI to observe this action that had long been awaited. I was not aware of what was in the warrant or was not in the warrant.
And what was the president's specific request for you to go to? What was the specific request that was made by the president for you to show up in Fulton County?
To go and observe the FBI's activities on this issue.
So why?
When you look at the fort, your question, sir.
Do you have the answer why the president was knowing about this affidavit before it was even served?
I'm not aware that the president knew about an affidavit before it was served.
Then why was he sending you to Fulton County?
This occurred the day that the FBI had it approved, their warrant approved by a local judge, and they began to execute this. To address your question.
See, the question that he is pointing out here is actually a really good one, and one that I've been asking since this story broke. When Tulsi Gabbard, came under fire for being there, and she put out that statement, that letter, where she was talking about, I was asked to be there by Trump. It's like, why did Trump and how did Trump know about this ahead of time? And it makes me want to go back and dig through the actual timeline of this. Like, when did they, if we can even get this information, when did they submit the affidavit to the judge? And what time did he approve it? And then exactly what time did the raid kick off? Because her story, you can choose to believe it if you want, seems a little off. But her story is that they found out the same day, and Trump's like, yeah, you should go down there. Like, did she just happen to be in Georgia? Or did she get on a jet and fly down there? Or did she know ahead of time? Like, this is a very good and interesting question from Warner. Again, noted douchebag. But this is like the question I want an answer to as well.
Sir, about
and her answer to me doesn't doesn't suffice, in my opinion.
The foreign nexus question. In order for us to better understand the vulnerabilities in our election systems that may exist today as we look to 2026, and yes, we are very focused on trying to make sure that this election is one that the American people have
Director
faith.
Gabbard, I've got a number of
count their
questions.
votes
Director
as
Gabbard,
cast.
I have a number of questions. Let me ask my next question, please. You have not.
Is he wearing a mood ring? Is that what that is on that finger? It looks like a mood ring. And I know this because when we were down at Legoland or down in Florida, we stopped by Universal on our last day there. And my daughter got a Harry Potter mood necklace. And I know exactly that's a mood ring. And if I'm not mistaken, he is not in a good mood right now based on this image.
Provided any of the required reports or briefings to this committee on foreign interference. This is the first threat assessment since 2017 that didn't even mention foreign interference. Last year, when you were in already confirmed, it mentioned it at high level. Are you saying there is no foreign threat to our elections in the midterms this year?
As I stated in the outset of my remarks, this year's annual threat assessment matches the prioritization of threats and
Please answer the
focus
question, yes or no. Is there foreign threat interference
that
to
the
our
president
elections
has
this year?
laid out.
Are there foreign?
Please allow me to answer the question, sir. The intelligence community has been and continues to remain focused on any collection and intelligence
Ma'am,
products that
ma'am,
show a potential
ma'am.
foreign threat for those who are
So
seeking
far,
to
there has been none then because you've made
in our
no
election
reports.
system.
Excuse me, ma'am. If you want to ask the questions, you should have stayed in Congress. Please answer the question.
I didn't ask you a question, sir. I'm trying to answer your questions.
So you're saying the failure to provide any reports or the failure to have any mention of a foreign threat assessment, I would draw the conclusion there must be no foreign threat to our elections in 26. So that brings me a question that I have for both you, ma'am, and Director Patel. There are reports that in 2020, the president was preparing an executive order to potentially seize ballots or bring in federal forces. There is a published report that there is a similar EO being drafted right now about 2026, citing China. Director Patel, do you have any knowledge of that draft EO?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. I do not, sir.
Director Gabbard, do you have any?
I do not.
Thank you.
Very interesting back and forth there. So he's trying to hammer her on like, is there any foreign threats to our elections? And barely letting her answer. She just gave a bunch of political talk. Like she didn't answer it. And if there was, like, there's no way based on what she said that it wasn't confirming or denying. And then he goes on to talk about that draft executive order that we discussed on the show a couple weeks ago that is coming from like the Patrick Byrne orbit. And they're the ones who let it on to the news that it was coming. Like, yeah, we created this draft executive order and we got it in front of Trump. And then everybody's like, oh, well, he's considering it because it's in front of Trump. I can't imagine how many things are in front of Trump right now. But it's interesting that he brought this up. And I do expect there to be some executive action taken in regards to our election at some point, hopefully prior to the midterms. I expect it. I don't know if it's going to be the one that these guys are talking about that's already out there in front of Trump. I bet he has his own agenda and own plan to deal with elections. But yeah, this is a very interesting back and forth. And we typically don't get the election assessments, the classified versions, ever, unless there's some sort of scandal and it comes out later after the fact. And so I don't know what he was trying to get here, but let's stay on the election news front. And I want to bring up the story from John Solomon. And again, I really think this story is a rerun. He was on Bannon this morning. I'm going to play, I don't know how long he's on here, but I'm going to play a little bit of it because it's good stuff. I'm going to speed it up a hair just to 1.25 so it doesn't eat up the entire show. Take a listen to this.
We need to focus on this. So John Solomon joins us. John, you last night released this with access to these reports about Chinese Communist Party influence in April of 2020. And I try to get to the Glenn Beck thing today. If not, I'll play it tonight. He did a great example. Here's what I don't understand. You've released something that is irrefutable because it's theirs. It's their report about their own cover-up. And yet Warner's sitting there and he's saying, hey, we know we have foreign interference in these elections. I want to get to that. But then he's hammering Tulsi Gabbard for Georgia, and she's playing defense. I'm kind of missing. I'm a simple guy. I'm missing it. You have revealed not only the CCP's involvement from April 2020, but the own departments like ombudsman are saying there was a cover up here. Why can't we just have a straight conversation at these hearings where we start why is Tulsi and Ratcliffe and Cash, why are they not putting this every time they're hammered on these questions? Why don't they just put out these reports, sir?
Yeah, that's a great question. You clearly today, Tulsi Gabbard appears to be unprepared for the questioning she had. There is great evidence to combat every one of these concerns that the Democrats are trying to manufacture in the hearing. If you're talking about Iran, let's just talk about Iran, something she didn't do a very good job of today, at least not yet that I saw in this hearing. We captured 3 IRGC officials on our soil. We got rid of them in January. In late January, we learned that Iran was negotiating for a hypersonic missile from China. In a couple of weeks later, we learned that they bought a whole bunch of shoulder-fired Stinger-like missiles that can take down airplanes. If that isn't an imminent threat to the United States, I don't know what it is. It's not possible that I can know this and Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe don't. They're the intelligence.
This is an interesting part here. He's like kind of criticizing them for not talking about the intelligence they had that considered Iran an imminent threat. And there's a lot of talk about that going on right now because of Joe Kent's resignation. And I mean, they kind of have a point where what John Solomon's talking about is like public knowledge stuff. And I could see why people would be like, okay, Trump, if there was an imminent threat, it'd make a lot of sense for you to just show us that. And then maybe some of these arguments against why we're over there could be taken away. And I don't think Trump wants to take those arguments away. I think he wants the discussion about it. But obviously, Tulsi Gabbard and Ratcliffe, if there's any classified intelligence, they're not going to talk about it. Unfortunately, I would love if they would talk about everything all the time, but they're just not going to do it. And so it is interesting that John Solomon is like kind of, I don't know. I mean, he's being very critical of them for that reason, full well knowing that whatever classified reasoning and justification they would have to get into the conflict would not be talked about at the hearing. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, it's just interesting that John Solomon's the guy who's taking that stance.
Agencies, they are not well prepared to answer the imminent threat question that was obviously going to be raised after yesterday's departure by Joe Kent. By the way, Joe Kent's statement, I know Joe Kent, I honor his service. I mean, the guy was deployed 11 times. He lost his wife in combat. Great American, but his statement yesterday just wasn't true. There was an imminent threat. The intelligence was there. The president put it all together and do it. And you're not serving the president if you say, hey, the president made that decision. I'm hands off on it. You're the DNI. You know the intel.
Hang on. Okay, hang on.
Yeah.
As you know, I'm close to Joe Kent. I revere the guy. He did the wife. The service of the country.
American hero.
On
He's
the
an
imminent
American
threat,
hero.
then I can hear, but American hero. But here's what's so. And I said yesterday, the way he left, I don't agree. You got to go see the president. The president's had your back before. Put you up this. But I said, leave that aside. The situation, not just the imminent threat, is there intelligence we're getting from the Mossad? Is there? But how can we have a hearing today? And even your case, you're saying, hey, the Iranians, it was imminent threat. We got it. How can we sit there and go, Ratcliffe, Tulsi, and Cash weren't ready for these questions and weren't ready for the fire they got. And on top of it, to me, that's all important. Obviously, fighting a war. But the deeper issue to me that's got to be addressed in front of the American people is the Chinese Communist Party. This 2020.
I agree.
And Tulsi, she's just getting hammered. She's getting hammered for the rate. Don't back off it. Lean into it and lean into the fact that, hey, this is what we've got, and this is why we got to get to the bottom of it, sir.
If Tulsi got
hang on, just like Bannon does. So before they get into the Chinese Communist Party thing here, another thing he said there about being unprepared, somebody in the chat made a good comment. Were they unprepared on purpose? That was AOB 22. That's something you always got to be aware of, guys. When we talk about Trump and his administration, they're two separate things. Trump, we know, is always doing psyops. We don't know that for sure about anybody else. We don't know who within his own administration is trying to sabotage him. He'll know. He probably has them there for a reason. But that's a great point. It's possible that they were unprepared on purpose.
Gabbard looked Mark Warner into the face and said, sir, we were told for 6 years that there was no foreign intrusions in our election. We've now indicted Iranians for hacking into one voter database. We now have evidence that 18 other states' voter databases were penetrated by China. And the reason you and I don't know about that is that a series of intelligence analysts and officers under Donald Trump and Joe Biden put party before country. They decided they were not going to tell the country. They were not going to tell the Congress. They were not going to tell the president of the United States that China did these things because they didn't want to give Donald Trump ammunition on his China policy. Because that is what the ombudsman concluded. On the record, there is a report that's been sitting with nobody noticing it. The Intelligence Committee.
By the way, we've talked about this before. Okay, so this has been a public thing that he's about to talk about here. He just said that this is a report that's just been sitting that nobody's talked about. We've talked about this on Badlands. I should go back and find the clips. But he's talking about the intelligence community ombudsman and his review of the activity surrounding the intelligence community activity surrounding the 2020 election and whatnot. So this has been out there for a while. And the fact that it's bringing it back up again is important because it's a rerun, and they only do the reruns when they're trying to lay the narrative groundwork for whatever is coming next to like advance the story. Like they put out these stories all the time. And there's a whole bunch of different stories going all over the place. It's chaotic, especially when something like the Iran war is going on. Well, when they know that they have a big next chapter to a story coming, they need to refresh everybody really quick with some breaking news that was broken 4, 5, 6 months ago. And everybody's like all caught up, all up in their emotions about it. And then they drop the next level of it, and it makes it that much more impactful.
Saying that the CIA intentionally kept the president and the country in the dark because they didn't like Donald Trump's policies. They even used disparaging names to describe the commander-in-chief they're supposed to be working for. We got to find out if any of those officers still work for the CIA because they should be fired. But she could have done that because she has all of this evidence. And by the way, she has a lot more evidence than what I've been trying to squeeze this out. She has oodles more evidence. It is more damning than what I've reported. And
see, how does he know this? And this is the part where I'm talking about when I say I think Tulsi Gabbard is the one that's feeding Jon Solomon, not Kash Patel. I'm going to rewind it a little bit, and we're going to listen. Pay attention here.
Officers still work for the CIA because they should be fired. But she could have done that because she has all of this evidence. And by the way, she has a lot more evidence than what I've been trying to squeeze this out. She has oodles more evidence. It is more damning than what I've reported, and she's been sitting on it. Why? I don't know. She didn't deploy it today. The president knows of this evidence. The White House chief of staff knows of this evidence. They went into I think Kash Patel has answered the imminent threat pretty interestingly on Iran. He's talked about China. He brought up the driver's licenses today. That was important. Ratcliffe seems a little bit more engaged, but Tulsi seems to just be roadkill. She's not using the data in front of her agency to tell a story that's much more compelling.
So think of what he just said there. He knows that Tulsi Gabbard has damning and compelling evidence about election interference and whatnot, and she's not using it. But Trump is aware. He mentioned Susie Wiles. He didn't mention anybody else. But clearly Jon Solomon's aware. So how is he aware? And then, yeah, obviously, why is Tulsi Gabbard not using it? Timing. Maybe there's a specific reason. It's just interesting. These are interesting revelations by Jon Solomon that I would love some more answers to.
Did the president, I thought I saw that he Truth Social. There's so much information. Did he Truth Social your report yet, sir?
Oh, yeah. The president gets
so hold
it.
On, okay, hang on. Hang on. This is what I don't get. Why is the White House, and look, we're trying to be constructive here because we're now down to the heart of it. Why is the president of the United States?
And this part's more about narrative, and then we'll come back and talk about it all again. But I do think this is a very interesting point they make here.
Because I said, hey, why does he read truth, which is him saying, I think this is important and you should focus on it, your explosive piece. And yet folks at the White House are telling you, no. We want to tamp this down. We don't want to mess up. Although Caroline did come out today, I think said at the sticks, we're not going to have a visit to China. How the hell can we have a visit to China? They're trying to buy hypersonic weapons. They're an ally to Iran. They're trying to get the oil out of the Gulf and let nobody else get it. And of course, Solomon's showing you that the pandemic and the stealing of the 2020 election is inextricably linked. When is the White House going to sit there and go, hey, maybe the president should do one of those bilats from the Oval Office, and Jon Solomon ought to be sitting in the other chair. We just take questions from the media, right? Wouldn't that be a way to get it all on the table, sir?
You know what the way to do it? What I think we've stumbled onto with the Trump administration, too, by the way, which has had an incredible run in the first 14 months. It's accomplished an enormous amount. But most of that was pre-wired because of 4 years of great preparation when they were in the diaspora. You now see that they're not prepared to pivot on their feet as well as they could. You don't have people who can think on their feet and make good decisions for the president to advance the agenda beyond the playbook you started with. And championship teams win with people that can make the moment great, even when it's under difficult circumstances. The second our stories came out, the second we started teasing them, you would think that the White House would have a narrative ready, that you would think that the president would get Harmeet Dillon, who has said on this network, on my show last week, we found tens of thousands of non-citizens that made it on the voter rolls, and we've only looked at 10 states. I just want to say that again. In 10 states, they've already found tens of thousands and dozens of illegal aliens who voted. If every senator was forced to sit for a briefing and say, Senator, in your state, we found this many non-citizens on your voter rolls, this many people voted, and oh, you're one of the states that DNI and CIA know got hacked by China or that they gained access to your voter data, because we don't know exactly how they did it. Was it hacking? Was it some other nefarious means? We don't know, but we know it happened. We would have the exact same circumstance in America that happened to Great Britain. When Great Britain learned in 2024 that its voter database was hacked, its leaders, its liberal leaders, because it was under liberal leadership, did the right thing. They briefed the country. They briefed the parliament. They were shamed that such a terrible thing happened. They punished China, and they made election security a top priority. We should be doing that here, but nobody's at the podium driving the narrative. Nobody knows or commands the evidence like what is sitting in their own files. Listen, they have stuff on Congress being penetrated by China. They should get that out because infiltrations of Chinese experts in Congress is a very serious matter. They know of money changing hands. They know of a foreign power. I confirmed this morning, Steve. There's a foreign power that was discussing routing USAID money to Joe Biden's campaign in 2024.
Ukraine.
That was intercepted by our intelligence agencies. They should be driving that narrative with evidence. They don't know how to command the podium. They don't know. President Trump does. His storytellers don't. They react. They counterpunch. They let the other people throw the first punch like Tulsi today, and they don't tell the narrative.
I mean, this is all just fascinating here. What they're talking about, that's Ukraine. That's the foreign country that was taking USAID money and other foreign funds and funneling it back into the Joe Biden campaign. All this stuff is going to come out eventually. It has to. It has to. Otherwise, we're wrong about a lot of things. It's just a matter of when. But yeah, this is such a good clip. So think of the two biggest stories we had now about elections from John Solomon and Just the News over the last 48 hours. We had the CCP infiltrating like voter data, using cyber means to infiltrate cyber data. Or gosh, I'm losing my mind. They've infiltrated voting machines and voter rolls to get our voter data. That is a rerun of the Eugene Yu story, which we went over way back when, like 4 years ago. Okay. And then we have a story today, or in the last 24 hours, of the intelligence community covering up stuff and hiding stuff from the president related to elections. Another rerun. 2 reruns back to back. They are setting the table for something here. And then he goes on to talk about, like, there's all this damning information out there. Why aren't they talking about this? Why aren't they commanding the podium? That's interesting. So I don't want to, don't put me on the record here. I'm not trying to make a prediction because I don't know for sure. But it feels like they're setting the table for something. Whether whatever they release is going to live up to it, who knows? But 2 reruns back to back. And then also the story that they put out today about the intelligence community hiding election meddling stuff from Trump because they oppose his policies. I put this clip out. Okay, and you guys have heard this clip a million times if you've watched me at all. It's one of my favorite Trump clips.
Don't forget, this persecution is being done by the same weaponized agencies that for 7 years have been running illegal psychological warfare campaigns against the American people, much as if they were trying to destabilize a foreign country.
So in this post, I quoted him, and then I put, the intel community is the enemy within. Okay, I want to show you who actually liked this post. Christopher Porter, former National Intelligence Officer for Cyber under Trump and then a little bit under Biden. This is the guy, if you remember my part 16, where we go over, and this is in the series multiple times, but the letter from DNI Ratcliffe on January 7th, views on intelligence community election security analysis, where he talks about he doesn't agree with the majority view expressed by intelligence community analysts, fully and accurately reflects the scope of the Chinese government's efforts to influence the 2020 federal elections. And then he talks about the NIO from Cyber, who was one of the ones holding the minority view about China. Christopher Porter is that NIO, the NIO Cyber. And you like that post. So that's interesting. And I do want, I've invited Christopher Porter to come on the show a few times. So he says he'll do it when he's able to and then when he's ready, whatever that means. But I'm looking forward to doing that someday because I have so many questions. He was very prevalent back when they were first coming out with a lot of the Rico Grande material, like some of the declassified intelligence stuff, some things from the assessments from the CIA, what Ratcliffe declassified. And there's a little communication between me and him. And he very much alluded to there's so much more to come about what happened in even 2024 that people aren't even talking about yet. And I don't think we've gotten that yet. So, yeah, very much looking forward to having him on eventually. Years from now, probably, when all this stuff gets settled. The chat, let's see what you guys are saying. Current admin is running PSYOPs nonstop. Yes, they are. New case, Solomon also claimed that there wasn't enough fraud in 2020 to change the outcome of the election, and that the majority of allegations of voter fraud have been disproven. I'm like, which ones, Jon Solomon? I don't remember him saying that. That's crazy if he did, though. Surprising if he did. Quaiconi, we had huge stories from Solomon 8 years ago and nothing ever happened. He is not as independent as it appears, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, is it his fault that things never happen? He does seem to be at the leading edge of a lot of the narrative stuff, you know? So I don't get, I don't know. I mean, he can control the narrative aspect of it and releasing the stuff as he gets it, but can he control the actual, like, justice phase of it? Hold on, sorry, I'm just trying to see here. Oh no. I think I might have a congressman coming on here in a second. Hold on. Pat Harrigan, I think, is going to be joining the show. I wasn't confident it was going to happen, so I didn't say anything about it. So I just got to send him the link here. So hold on. You guys get to watch me do my show prep. Now that I don't have a producer, I have to do it all myself, you know? Sweet. So if you guys have any questions you want me to ask Pat Harrigan, representative, he's coming on here in a little bit. And I've had him on the show before, so I probably won't do the taxes question. I mean, I could ask him again, see if anything's changed now that we've had so much exposure on the fraud. But yeah, what do you guys want me to ask him when he comes on? I think originally I said I wanted to talk about the Iran situation a little bit because he had a pretty good post on it. And then that was a while ago. And then some of the Save Act stuff. Speak with the Lotion Ayatollah. Yeah, I'm going to leave that on there. Strokes, Suzanne Rice. You guys aren't giving me many topics. Which state does he represent? North Carolina? I'll show you who it is. He is congressman from NC10. This is him here. You guys probably recognize him. But yeah, I'm gonna read this post from him right now that I know he's for sure coming on. Here's how I really feel about Iran. And this post was from February 28th. I think it was that right after the strike started. People used to ask me how I felt about progress in Afghanistan. I would always say we were 3 weeks away from victory and 3 days away from defeat on a sliding scale. Yesterday, we were in the exact same spot. Tomorrow, we'd be in the exact same spot. We were allowed to do enough not to lose, but we never were allowed to do what we needed to do to win. Play that theme across the rest of our Middle East involvements. Anywhere we decided to sponsor a color revolution, grand idea, and scheme of involvement, we'd get involved, commit resources, people, and try to westernize or capacity build tons of military contracts and money pouring overseas. Then nothing. We'd hold short, get politically bogged down, and paralyze our military operations, and we'd lose. For years, that became the playbook, getting into conflicts without a clear path to victory, big ideas, lofty objectives, but no willingness to do what it actually takes to win. Our troops were asked to operate in the gray, constrained by politics, chasing goals that sounded good in think tanks, but did not translate on the battlefield. President Trump tried to take the handcuffs off during his first term. He did some bold things, demolishing ISIS in weeks and assassinating Soleimani on the tarmac of Baghdad International. But what we are now seeing is a fully formed doctrine, clarity of purpose, decisive action, and no apologies for defending American interests and to President Trump's second term. An incredibly decisive operation in Midnight Hammer, sending a clear message to Iran, picking off Maduro and Venezuela, sending the clearest message to all of the adversaries of the United States that we are willing to use unprecedented capabilities and are truly done messing around. And then today, Ayatollah Khamenei is dead. He's an evil man. and American and Israeli air power sent them into the next world straight to hell. Gone are the days of failed regime change and capacity building. Gone are the days of kicking the can down the road and getting nothing done. Gone are the days of sacrificing our military authority and capabilities on the altar of political correctness. The world is a dangerous place when nations threaten the United States of America or its close allies. President Trump is very clear. We will seek terms of peace, but if peace is unobtainable, we are going straight for the jugular because we are done getting nothing done. Because the world deserves peace and to be free of leaders who oppress and oppose peace, and simply more than anyone else in the world by a factor of 10 because we can. This ain't your father's regime change. It's not the global war on terror. It's not even war. It's avoiding war through the limited, extremely violent, and decisive use of force that achieves decisive overmatch and ends the ability for conflict altogether. It is reshaping the globe and the balance of power in the United States of America. Once again, we are rolling the tables. Anyone who has been to war hates war, but I like what we're doing. And why? Because decisive strength is what prevents long wars and protects American lives. This isn't over. Pray for our troops. John asked if he can prove he was legitimately elected. If we do get on the election topic, I can do that. Ask if his fraud changed his opinion on paying taxes. I can do that. Let me write these down. I think the first question I'm going to ask is about the Iran war, though. Is this the same act still alive, or are they doing filibuster? Where are we at? John, why aren't they codifying any of Trump's EO into law? What's wrong with the GOP? That's a good question. What are his views about putting boots in Iran? Ask if Lindsey Graham likes hot. I am looking for some serious questions. I think Josh should take over for Kent. I mean, yeah, I could ask the obvious, like, Israel question. Yeah, I'll go from there. I think I'm gonna ask him, oh my God, you guys are so lost. The Epstein faction is ruling all of this, and you guys talk about politics. I am out. Well, considering I've literally never seen you before, apologies. But yeah, there was actually another Epstein story today. Maybe it's not even new. Yeah, the House Oversight Committee subpoenas Attorney General over Epstein investigation. The story's not going away. Whatever your thoughts are on it. Oh, the Congress voting to hide the payment. That's a good one. I like how you guys are like helping me interview prep right now live. Ask me if he's down with that shitty barbecue over there. Is it true that Lindsey Graham likes to slurp on? Oh, that's gross. Ask about a connection between Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, Tucker Carlson, Joe Kent. What's the connection to the conspiracy? For those asking about this guy, I mean, again, I've had him on before. Congressman Pat Harrigan, NC-10, former Green Beret, Bronze Star recipient, had a business out there in North Carolina as well. How are we supposed to get behind the SAVE Act for voter ID when there have been no arrests pertaining to the topic? It's a good one, too. I mean, the Voter ID Act is clearly not going to pass. I'm expecting it to be very political. A lot of political answers. I announced my departure once, but it was premature. You guys are funny. Anyway, I'm going to keep going until he hops in the backstage. So if you guys have any other questions when he's on, let me know. We have, I thought this story was ridiculous. A federal judge ordered restoration of Voice of America operations. Federal judge on Tuesday ordered the Trump administration to reinstate Voice of America operations, directing that more than 1,000 employees placed on administrative leave be returned to work after the government-funded broadcaster was largely shut down last year. U.S. District Judge Royce Lamberth gave the U.S. Agency for Global Media 1 week to submit a plan to restore full operations, criticizing officials for failing to justify the massive reduction in staff. Think about what's happening here. Trump is trying to shut down an agency, trying to streamline things, get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse. Trump says there's an agency that doesn't need to exist. They shut it down. And then you have a federal judge come in and be like, no, you can't do that. You have to keep this agency working. This is absurd. Absolutely absurd. Ask him if he supports the Congress has to wait in line at the airport like everybody else. Funny. Ask him if anything can stop what is coming. Probably won't do that. Maybe I could, though. Then they'll be like, well, what's coming? Like, I don't know, bro. Just it. And nothing can stop it. Except for Badlands, apparently, with all the things we say. To that story. The Senate began voting on the Save America Act. This is probably one of the things I'll bring up. Senate voted Tuesday afternoon to begin debate on the new Safeguard American Voter Eligibility SAVE Act, which requires people to present proof of citizenship to register to vote and requires Americans to show ID when voting. Senate voted 51-48 to proceed to debate on the bill, despite Alaska Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski voting no and North Carolina GOP Senator Tom Tillis not voting. That is an interesting one, too. He's a fellow North Carolinian. Wonder why Tom Tillis didn't vote. President Trump has threatened not to endorse any Republican senators in the midterms who oppose the legislation. There's some fun True Social posts, too. Trump last night after Venezuela beat the United States in the World Baseball Classic, by the way. And Trump just said, statehood, President Donald J. Trump. Here talking about the shutdown, he says the Democrats' purposeful DHS shutdown is causing chaos at the airports. These lunatics are being totally unreasonable, and the radical left asks. They are fully to blame and must pay a big price for the good of our country in the midterm elections. Make America great again. You know, I might ask them about that too. Why did they separate out the bill? Because, I mean, you could see this coming a mile away. Sorry, I need to look something up here quick. Yeah, so they avoided the partial shutdown. This is back in end of January. He said that was coming. John asked why they help migrants over people who lost their homes. Dual citizenship is treason. Breaks news. Just in, massive fire scene in Saudi Arabia's capital, Riyadh, following Iranian missile strike. Joe Gilmore, the storm arrived, went away, and revealed a field of fine rugs. Asked about the fraud in the U.S. for decades. Yeah, you guys, we'll see how it goes. Another post from Trump. Remember for all those absolute fools out there, Iran is considered by everyone to be the #1 state sponsor of terror. We are rapidly putting them out of business. This is Trump's kind of response to the people wanting to know the justification for us going over there. He posted, when is Too Late Powell lowering interest rates? President Donald J. Trump. I thought this was funny. For all the fake news out there, it's called the Save America Act, not the Save Act. Nobody knows what the Save Act means. And that's true, but it is a real bill. That's just funny. This is one that they tried to pass before from Chip Roy. Yeah. I was, for some reason, saying Rep Roy Chip because it's read backwards here. And this is a short one, but it's essentially the same thing, just a lot shorter. But yeah, there is a Save Act. So I just thought it was interesting that he did that. And then last thing from Trump. I wonder what would happen if we finished off what's left of the Iranian terror state, let the countries that use it, we don't, be responsible for the so-called strait. That would get some of our non-responsive allies in gear, and fast. And here we go. We got him joining. Good timing. Let me bring him on here. Well, he's backstage. I want to wait till his camera turns on. Yeah, so bringing on Representative Pat Harrigan. And if you guys have any questions for him, I'll try to monitor the chat. Well, welcome to the show, Representative Harrigan. How you doing?
Hey, John, I'm well. How are you?
Doing well. Good to have you back, and thank you for coming back.
Yeah, you bet. I'm very glad to be here. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Interesting things going on for you guys up on Capitol Hill. I think I want to start with the reason I think me and your communications director started talking again was you had a pretty good post about the conflict going on in Iran right now. And
yeah,
there's so much confusion and whatnot going back and forth all over the place about this thing. And even Trump himself, we talk about it all the time. You know, he's almost carpet bombing the narrative. He's throwing out so much misinformation, disinformation. But based on what we've seen so far, where are you at right now with the conflict and everything that's going on over there?
Well, I think militarily we're actually achieving our objectives, and we are on the timeline that the administration actually initially set out to achieve. And so I think that's a really good thing. I also think that the early stages of a conflict, which is hopefully the end of a conflict, by the way, for the United States, are also the easiest. Kind of what comes next or what could possibly come next is where I think the administration could make some mistakes, or where anybody could really make mistakes, particularly if we don't learn from history of the last 25 years of our involvement in the conflict during the global war on terror. So I think everybody's actually hoping that this comes to a very swift end within the next couple of weeks, and that we achieve the strategic interests that the president laid out. I think folks at this point know what they are. I'm happy to go through them if you would like. But suffice to say, I hope we're nearing the end of this, having some really good outcomes, at least setting Iran back by a number of years.
Sure. And my audience is very familiar with the reasons and whatnot that were laid out. Real quick, my audience pointed out your mic sounds a little raspy. I don't know if it's
really. Hang on, let me try to put it up here a little closer. Is that better?
A little bit. So here, I'll ask you a question, then we'll see how it goes through this next round. So moving beyond the Iran stuff, I do want to focus a lot of the conversation today on the Save America Act, because I think it's very interesting, the dynamics at play with this going on right now, and they're voting on it, or discussing it anyway, in the Senate. And it's one of those things. Trump posted something about a month ago where he's like, it doesn't matter whether Congress wants voter ID, we're going to get it. And to me, that almost made it seem like we don't need this Save America Act. Yet he's very much pushing it. But what are your thoughts? Like, I don't think it's going to pass in the Senate. I saw Tom Tillis yesterday didn't even vote to pass the bill or to get to debate. But what do you see playing out here?
Well, interestingly enough, Tom Tillis and I were on the same flight coming into Washington yesterday, along with Derek Van Orden, and we were delayed by about 3.5 hours. And that's we all missed votes yesterday. It's just kind of some of the lagging effects of the storm that hit the eastern seaboard. I think we had dozens of members of Congress not make it in on time yesterday, but I did take advantage of that time, and I had about an hour-long conversation with Tom Tillis trying to get him to support the Save America Act. And we actually had a very good back and forth. And, I think that, look, this is existential for the country, and that's what the American people believe. It's not something that 40% of Americans believe. It's something that 80% of Americans believe. And for whatever reason, because of politics, Democrats are choosing this as a hill to die on. And that just doesn't reflect where most of America is. I think most of America wants safe and secure elections. Even if they believe that we have that right now, we should be doing everything in our power, both regardless of what party you are, from to make sure that that is indeed the case. I mean, we all know this, right? If you have the opportunity for fraud, the human condition will commit fraud. It's just that simple. And so I think that there's a lack of recognition in the Senate that this is a hill that we want to die on and should, right? And it's not that you want to die, and it's not that you want to give up seats, but it's that you want to lay the foundation for the future of America and American elections to be safe and secure. And that is something that is, in my mind, worth giving up seats for. Some in the Senate disagree with that.
So their justification, like Tom Tillis, what is his reason to not necessarily be a support, or is he supportive of the bill? I guess maybe I'm not sure.
You know, I think he's on the fence. Honest to goodness,
Really?
I think that, yeah, I do. I think he's on the fence. I think it's been reported that he's against it. I would say after the conversation yesterday, he's on the fence. And so, you know, if it gets to a point, and I certainly don't want to, speak for anybody else other than myself. But, I think that if it comes down to like a McCain scenario where it's, thumbs up or thumbs down, I don't know that he's a thumbs down on it to sink it. So I think that the conversation we had was fruitful. I think it was a good exchange on both sides. Obviously I've been very, very much in favor of the Senate taking this up, and not just taking it up for the purpose of, looking like we're taking it, the Senate's taking it up, but actually getting it across the finish line. I do think more in the Senate need to recognize that this is an existential issue that not only secures the future of our elections in this country, but is fundamentally what's either going to get people out or keep people home when it comes to voting in November.
Yeah, and so based on where it's going now, it doesn't seem like they're actually going to pass it. If without the talking filibuster and whatnot, they're going to need a 60 vote threshold. That's my understanding of it, and they're not going to get that. So what happens then? Like what do we do?
Well,
what's Congress's approach?
Yeah, without the talking filibuster, that's right. There is a 60 vote threshold. And so the talking filibuster is basically a programmatic, systematic step that comes after introducing a privileged motion in the Senate. And a privileged motion effectively only takes 51 votes. The vice president gets involved. He basically overrules the parliamentarian. This is something that has been discussed many times in history. It's never been properly executed. This is something that could be executed. And look, I think some are concerned that at the end of the day, this would end the filibuster under any type of emergency premise in the future, which on our side would be very concerning if you're talking about things like packing the Supreme Court or taking away Americans' gun rights. If we found ourselves, which we will find ourselves in the future, of being in the minority across the board with respect to the legislative and the executive branches. And so, there's some risk there, but the question is that risk worth taking in order to have safe and secure elections? I think that it is.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I also think that the election system in this country is fraudulent to the point, like I think the Save America Act doesn't go nearly far enough. Like there's so many things wrong, like from gerrymandering to the financials and campaigning to the machines. Like I had a whole list of 20 things that were on top of just the voter ID stuff. But if this doesn't pass, even getting rid of the discussion about the talking filibuster and the ramifications with that, because that's a whole separate thing. I don't think it's going to pass. And so what is Congress going to do? What do you expect Trump to do to secure our elections leading up to the midterms? Because I do think if we had any form of free and fair elections, if it's even possible to get there, the Democrats and the party system that we have would almost go away, because I think the uniparty is much more of a threat than people also realize. But I don't think Democrats have a majority in this country. I don't think they win most elections moving forward, even if we operate within that dynamic. I think Republicans and the conservative agenda, most people are conservative. I believe that. So how do we fix our elections if this doesn't pass? What's the next step?
Well, I think you've got to look at what President Trump said, and he's always got something up his sleeve. But he did indicate, the way he said it, did indicate that maybe he's got a plan of something that he can execute under his authority underneath the executive branch. I'd certainly, love to see that and have that move forward. That would certainly be a lot easier than the process that we're talking about right now. Beyond that, Congress, the House of Representatives, has done its job at this point. I mean, we've passed the SAVE Act 3 different times, trying to repackage it in different ways to get it across the finish line in the Senate. I don't know what more we in the House of Representatives could do, because, when you're looking at the big picture of getting this across the finish line or not, moving it slightly left or slightly right in terms of the programmatics of what's in it, what the policy actually does, making it a little bit better than it is right now, that's really not the issue. The issue is structurally, how do you get it through the United States Senate? And I think that, if this ultimately ends up failing, we end up in a spot where there's really nothing that we in the House of Representatives can do about it, other than continue to make an issue out of it, up to the point where you've got a greater portion of the public that's kicking and screaming that we have a problem. I would tell you that we've always had a problem, right? If you look back, I think every locality, every county has a story of, well, remember back in the 50s where the lights went off in the courthouse and suddenly there was 27 more votes when the lights went back on, right? Like, this isn't a new problem that we've had in the country. I think what's different is people's understanding of it has changed.
Sure.
And the scope and the possibility for fraud has increased exponentially because of the different way that we take in votes, the amount of time that we allow people to vote. All of these infuse risk into the system. And I think that's what we're trying to tighten up here with the Save America Act. But, as frustrating as it is, I wish it was easier, the process that we do have, although it doesn't always work for us with what we're trying to get accomplished, it does often work in favor of us when we're in a minority position and can't get things done. But it also prevents the Democrats from getting things done too. So look, I wish that this was cleaner. I wish that the Senate was putting up a bigger fight here. I think it's yet to be seen. They could roll into a talking filibuster. I mean, that's what Mike Lee wants to do. So I don't want to, call the ball here before it actually happens. We'll see if this thing goes into this weekend and they move into a talking filibuster. But I think those are the different options and array of sequence of events that are on the table.
Sure. Looking forward to the remainder of the term then, what are the priorities of Congress? Like, what do you see playing out, not just here, but globally, on the world stage with the domestic conflicts and everything, the global conflicts, the domestic economic stuff. What do you anticipate you guys are going to be working on?
Well, first and foremost, I think that we've got to get DHS funded, right? We've got a conflict in Iran that has created the probably single greatest opportunity for domestic violence via terrorism that we've seen since the post 9/11 era. We know there was over 350 terrorists that came across Joe Biden's open borders. We don't know where they are. And right now we've got the singular and group of law enforcement agencies that are responsible for thwarting those threats, completely unfunded at this point. To me, that's completely irresponsible by the Democrats, how they could possibly allow that to happen. Given this isn't a Republican issue, this is not a Democrat issue. This is like well beyond any type of disagreement we might have over immigration. This is fundamentally the safety and security of the American people and American citizens at this point in our homeland. So I'm hoping that we can get that done sooner rather than later as our number one priority.
Okay, yeah. On that topic, leading up to the partial shutdown we had, there was like 4 or 5 things in a bill, and you guys separated out the DHS funding and funded everything else. Do you remember that? That was like back in January, I think.
Yes,
and
that was.
We were talking about on my show. I was like, what's going to happen here is the Democrats, they don't want to fund DHS. Like, this is very damaging to Trump and his agenda. The fact that they're separating this means that itself is never going to get funded. Like, you could see it coming a mile away. And I'm curious why you guys separated it out like that, because it was clearly they weren't going to fund it. They weren't going to come to the table. You know what I mean? Why did the Republicans choose to separate that out?
Well, keep in mind, we'd actually passed all 12 appropriations bills, including the DHS funding, out of the House. So the House had already voted for it in favor. And then you had what transpired up in Minneapolis that kind of gave the Democrats the wedge that they were looking for in order to stop it. And so the question came down to, do you just hold fast and get all 5 of these across the finish line, which I think leadership just came to the conclusion was not going to be structurally possible to do. And in that case, then you have a much greater government shutdown that impacts a far greater set of government services and has, some pretty substantial implications. Or do you just separate off that one part that's going to be a problem? I honestly don't think, John, that there was a right or wrong move to separating it out or not. I think both had equal amounts of challenges as they did solving the opportunity problems that were there. I don't think either of them would have been clean. And so just from a member's perspective, reflecting in 2020 vision upon what leadership decided to do, I think we would have just had a different set of problems that you could have said the exact same thing about that decision. And at the end of the day, this is a majority-led institution. The majority's got to, basically play the play that's called. And ultimately, that was the call that was even made by the president of what to do. But I think everybody made that call eyes wide open that we would be having this problem with the Democrats, that we'd be having this problem with our national security. I don't think what people were counting on was a conflict in Iran, kind of exacerbating the overall impact of the problem that exists beyond, TSA not getting paid, air traffic control, all of that we unfortunately all know and have experienced with other shutdowns over the last several years. But now we've got a particularly acute problem that's incredibly, potentially very harmful to the American people. So it's heightened the awareness of the issue.
Yeah, and considering how political things are, I mean, do you anticipate the Democrats actually coming to the table on this at any point?
Unfortunately, I don't until something bad happens in this country. And I think that that's a really terrible condemnation of the state of our politics and where we are right now, that the Democrats can't come together and do what's actually in the best interest of the country because they're fighting President Trump and his agenda at every turn. I mean, look, how many of these people harangued Iran for decades, all for President Trump to actually do something bold. And you can agree or disagree with what he did, but the entire Democratic bloc is moving like they've got Trump derangement syndrome, regardless of the positive impacts that President Trump's engagement has had here. And I think that that's just a sad commentary on where we are in our politics these days, where we just can't seem to put the country above our own parties.
Yeah, it's too bad. One more question for you. And I did ask you this question last time you were on, but I always have to do it. It's been a few months since our last interview. So recently Trump, it was just 2 days ago, this week, he established a task force, and JD Vance is going to be leading it to tackle the fraud problem. There's been a lot of talk in this country over the past 6 months and more about the fraud issue, how much of our taxpayer dollars are being fraudulently used. And I got to ask, has your mind changed at all about why American citizens should be paying taxes?
Yeah. I mean, look, if I'm a taxpayer, I pay a lot of tax because I'm a business owner, before I came into Congress and still am. The reality is that there's nothing more infuriating than seeing your bank account drain between January 1st and April 15th because you're sending money to the federal government that is supposed to be working for the benefit of American citizens, that's supposed to be a good steward of the money that you are putting into the national kitty, and seeing that money completely wasted, seeing it abused by people who aren't supposed to be in our country in the first place, seeing it abused by folks who have become naturalized citizens but don't share our values and simply want to perpetuate fraud on the American people. So I understand everybody's frustration with this. I share it. I think it's disgusting. It's reprehensible. And I'm excited to see that the president is actually tackling this issue. I also think that alongside of what the executive branch is doing, we do have an opportunity, although we're slightly challenged by math with the number of members and the size of the majority that we have, of doing a second reconciliation package that's built around fighting and combating fraud in this country and in our government. And I think that that's something that's even really hard for Democrats to fight against But I'm sure that they'll find a way, because they've sure done an incredible job of trying to stick up for these people up in Minneapolis. And look, this isn't just Minneapolis. It's not just Minnesota. This is every single state across the country where we have leakage and we have fraud, waste, and abuse in our government spend. And, that's even in uncomfortable places to talk about for Republicans, like the Department of War. It exists everywhere because government's inherently inefficient, less effective than the private sector. But the American people should have some element of confidence that their government has their fingers wrapped around these problems and is minimizing them to the greatest extent possible. And I think very clearly to all Americans who pay taxes right now, they don't have that confidence, nor should they. So I don't blame them. I'm as frustrated about it as anybody else. And we need to do very serious work up here to corral the issue. And I think the president, with his executive order just a couple days ago, talking about the anti-fraud task force, I've had countless business owners reach out to me just in the last couple days, volunteer to be on the task force. So I think that this is something that actually has traction and momentum. People aren't going to forget about it. And I do think it's something that we can actually dig in there and make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my perspective, and I know my audience would probably feel the same way. It's hard to expect the people that we see as creating and perpetuating the problem of the fraud being the ones to fix it. Kind of like I've always said, I don't think our elected representatives are going to be the ones to fix election fraud because they're the beneficiaries of it. And so, I mean, everything you said is spot on. I just know so many people right now are at a point where it's like, our deficit just crossed $1 trillion 5 months into this year. It's going to be what, 1.8 trillion for the year next year. I mean, the deficit continues to go up. The debt in this country continues to go up, and all we get are stories of like, oh, look at all this fraud everywhere. But don't worry, guys, we're going to fix it. It's just hard at this point to be like, okay, we trust you, we'll fix it, instead of, okay, yeah, maybe we stop making you guys pay taxes and arresting you for it, while we can just print the money we want anyway. And literally every penny that gets brought in on taxes is spent fraudulently. Trump, when he was in Davos, he said, if we get rid of 50% of the fraud in this country, we could balance the budget. And that number alone is mind-blowing, because that means $1.7 trillion of fraud is half the fraud number, and that's what would balance the budget. But
well, and let me tell you that I share that perspective, and I'll tell you, I've only been up here for a year, but as we were going through the initial phases of President Trump's administration, last year, like this time last year, we were, full blown Doge, right?
Yep.
And it never escaped me that we've got all this outrage up here about the inefficiency of government, and nobody seemed to really realize that, well, who created all this inefficiency? It's the people who are up here, right? I mean, how did you have somebody like Elon Musk come in and identify billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of really government waste and excess? And everybody's like, oh, look how bad all this stuff is. And you're like, you guys are the ones that did it. Yeah. I'm really surprised that nobody's calling the ball on this. As I'm this young freshman up here. The guys that are taking credit for the solution are the ones that have actually legislated the problems. So I share that perspective with you. And I think, look, I always want to look at things with a glass half full, but there's a new crop of folks coming into leadership here in Washington, into the legislative branch. It's a younger crowd. It's a lot of veterans. And I think that the turnover of that fresh blood is going to be really, really healthy for the future of this country, because, look, like, hey, we've got to win, and we've got to win as a team. We're going to lose as a team too. That's just the way that this political game works. But the conversations that we're having on the side or behind the scenes as groups of young members, of younger veterans, are, hey, we're going to start doing things differently when we've actually got the reins. And so I think that there's actually a lot of reason to be hopeful. And I'd always end with this too. Despite all the friction and frustration of where we are today, it is a whole heck of a lot better than if Kamala Harris and Tim Walz were president and vice president of this country. And so we definitely have our challenges ahead of us. I wish things went different in certain circumstances with this administration. I think we all do. Things should have been a lot cleaner. Things should have been done that fundamentally were promised to do, haven't been done, but we have done a lot. And we actually have gotten a lot of what we promised to get done. And that's a whole lot better than it would have been if the other side had won. And so, I'd encourage everybody to stay positive, focus on the good things. We still need to take care of the things that haven't lived up to the commitments that Republicans made when we got elected back in 2024. But also understand government's a work in process, and all we can do is try to make it a little bit better tomorrow than it was today.
Sure. Have you noticed that it's been difficult to do that? Like going in, you're a freshman, has actually in affecting change been challenging? Because from our perspective, again, we're not there day to day, but I know most people, when they look at Congress, are like, okay, yeah, we love the name change of the post office, and oh, great, another spending bill. But there aren't many things that actually affect the day to day, like a lot of people were hoping for coming to the Trump administration. So, when you say, we've actually gotten a lot done, we don't feel that. We see a lot of social media clips and whatnot, but we don't feel it on the day to day level in our lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I fully understand that. And look, what I would tell you is where our office and my team have really actually made a difference is I sit on the Armed Services Committee, right? I've got a military background, and everybody kind of focuses on those big core issues that never really seem to get solved up here. But if you actually focus on the periphery issues where there really isn't a champion, you might not have a single member of the 435 members of Congress, not even a single senator of the 100 senators that we have that are like looking at this issue and saying, you know what, I can take this and I can solve this problem, like we did with drones in the Department of War over the last year. We were able to make substantial change to the way that we were focusing on this problem, realizing, hey, we're super far behind. We actually have to make some strategic investments here. And oh, by the way, can we not just spend more money doing that? Can we actually stop making investments that haven't helped us win the last 30 years of war, are not relevant to us deterring or defeating China, and reprogram that money, billions of dollars, to actually focus on this drone deficiency that we have, both from an offensive capability and from a defensive capability? We were able to champion that. We got 14 different initiatives through the National Defense Authorization Act last year, which is basically like passing 14 different bills on the floor. And so the answer is yes, you can make a significant difference up here. The reality is it's hard to make a difference in the big areas, but I would say that actually the reconciliation package that we had last year, if you look at it from a tax perspective, and I understand like a lot of people haven't filed their taxes yet this year, they're going to get a lot more money back than they ever have before in their lives. That's going to make a real difference, particularly for seniors that aren't going to be paying tax on Social Security. And look at what was actually done at the southern border, right? I mean, you had a wide open southern border where there's not a single person released into this country now. For 9 straight months, I think is the number. And so to say that there hasn't been any change is fundamentally untrue. But to say that it has not lived up to maybe what we all had hoped we'd be able to do, I fully understand that and share that friction and share that concern that the American people have. And I think we're all seeing that and have seen that in real time when we circle right back to where we are and where we started this conversation. Which is kind of the slog that the SAVE Act has been through the Senate. And that's disappointing and it's frustrating to everybody, and you can understand why.
Yeah. And the sentiment from a lot of people, my audience, is like, what's the actual solution here? Because we see all these issues compounded, from the fraudulent elections to the fraudulent spending to everything. And the common denominator, no offense, like I enjoy talking to you, and you seem to speak in a way that most people don't. So I'm not trying to say this is you directly, but we see the problem is the government. You know what I mean? And so more laws to make our lives better. That's not what we want. Less laws. We want less government. It's you guys are the problem.
No, absolutely. And look, this is what you get when you have a democratic republic, right? And this is the condemnation about where we are is the representation that we have up in Washington, D.C. is actually a mirror reflection of ourselves.
Yeah.
And so any problem that we have with the system is actually a problem that we have with ourselves, which you can trace back to cultural rot, walking away from God, and, forgetting the principles and the values by which the founding fathers actually chartered the future of our nation, right?
Yeah.
We've gotten fat and happy. We've stolen money from our children and our grandchildren in the form of continued deficit spending. And yeah, that spending is unfortunately continuing to still grow. Now it's our priorities instead of Democratic priorities, but that's not solving the problem by any stretch of the imagination. As you said, like, we might be on track for a historic deficit this year. That's not the priority that the president laid out. That's not the priority that the president ran on. And certainly anything that he has said about reducing the debt and deficit, and you got to tackle the deficit first before you can tackle the debt, has now been impacted by the Supreme Court with its ruling on tariffs, which is impacting hundreds of billions of dollars. But still, that's probably only 15 or 20% of the overall deficit problem.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about the other 80%. And so I think what folks would find, particularly in this younger generation that's here, is a clear-eyed understanding of what the problems really are. And there still aren't the easy solutions that we want to see have happened to these problems.
Yeah.
And I would argue, and again, this might be a little bit more information than people want, right? But like, if you look back into the structure, and I don't know how much time you got here, but like, if you give me a couple minutes.
As much time as you got, man.
Good deal. All right, perfect. So like, here's the fundamental problem. Like, I've been up here for a year, so take this with a grain of salt, right? But like, the fundamental problem that we have in this country is that we actually no longer agree on the problems anymore. If you look back to the structure of the Constitution, right? How do we actually move things through the legislative process? How does the legislative branch interact with the executive branch? How are those checked by the judicial branch? And how was all this envisioned to happen when our founding fathers actually chartered the future course of our country? Well, the founding fathers presupposed that while we would always have very broad disagreement on the solutions to our problems, they did presuppose that we would agree on the problems. And they presupposed that because they understood that we all at least had shared values. We had shared principles. We had a shared background. And we might really, really disagree on the solutions, but we're going to agree on the problems. If you look at some of the biggest problems that we have now, and I can just prove to you that we don't agree on them, like, look at men and women's sports, right?
Yeah.
Like, you either believe men and women's sports is a fundamental problem or you don't. And the solution based on the Constitution, right? The Constitution's structure in and of itself requires consensus in order to get anything done. But consensus is supposed to be derived by people that share the same set of values and principles. Well, the problem is if you don't have a population that shares those values and principles anymore, then the only compromise, the only consensus that can actually exist is a really dangerous thing called compromise devoid of principle. The framers were looking for principled compromise, and you can only get principled compromise through people that share the same set of values and principles and perspectives on the way that life ought to be lived. But when you don't have that, like, the solution, the consensus position, right? The compromise solution to men and women's sports or no men and women's sports is a little bit of men and a little bit of women's sports. And you're going to get laughed out of the room for that. Nobody thinks that's a credible solution, right? Take immigration. You either think illegal immigration and uncontrolled borders are a problem, or you don't think it's a problem and you want a borderless world where we welcome everybody regardless of the costs. Like, the consensus, the compromise solution that I think we all remember that the Senate came up with like 2.5 years ago was, we're going to let 1,200 illegal aliens in a day, right? That satisfied nobody.
Yeah.
But it's because we fundamentally don't agree on the problems anymore. And that's a really big problem, guys. I mean, like, John, this is, to me, this is the structural issue of why we can't solve the big problems that we all look at as conservatives and say, good grief, guys, we know the answer to these problems, but half the country doesn't look at it that way. And you see that reflection of that mirror up here in Washington, D.C. And that's why it appears that nothing gets done on the big things until, and look, this is where you've got to look back. I take a very ecclesiastical perspective to life, which I think a lot of your viewers do too.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Where there's nothing new under the sun, and everything that has been will be again, and everything that is today has been before. Look, our country responds to crisis. And unfortunately, and just like I answered your question about, when are we going to get DHS funded? Well, probably when we have a crisis. And that probably means when we had a terrorist who got across our southern border in the last 4 years of President Joe Biden actually commits a terrorist act here that kills a lot of people that didn't need to happen if we actually had the government agencies that were responsible for preventing that act from happening actually on the ball because they were being funded. That's probably what it's going to take, unfortunately. And that's the lesson of history. We've all, as distasteful as it may sound, we do have to exercise some patience from a 300,000 foot level, looking at things the way that they have been historically in our country, and understand that's probably the way that they're going to play out in the future. Is that frustrating? Absolutely. I wish we could do better. But as flawed and as difficult as our system is, there is not a better one that has generated better outcomes in the entire history of mankind. And so that's where I still come back to, despite my friction, frustration, and disappointment with how some things have gone in this last year, I still have a glass half full perspective, both for my life, for my kids' lives, and for everybody's lives. We've just got to make the most of the opportunities we have, which is where I get right back to, I hope the Senate actually does something here and takes a principled stand with the SAVE Act.
Yeah. And, I agree, even though I ask the tough questions, I do too have a glass half full perspective. I think anybody who believes in God would have that naturally, right? But, there's these obvious problems that exist that you have to talk about. Not everything needs to be cheerleaded, because there are some people that exist out there that only celebrate everything as a win, always, no matter what. Trump can do no wrong. And, I think he's operating on a much deeper, and he's navigating a much tougher battle than I think most people realize. And, with the media and the onslaught that he's up against. That's another thing, real quick. I don't know how much time you have. I think you said you'd be here for 15 minutes and you've been here for like 45, and this is amazing. So, you're muted now. I don't know if, I think it says you have to unmute your mic.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I got 5.
Okay. Real quick question. There was the Smith-Munt Modernization Act. Are you familiar with that?
The Smith what?
Smith-Munt Modernization Act.
No.
It was from back in 2012. It was a while ago, but it loosened a lot of longstanding restrictions on basically the psyops being run on the American people. And Trump has talked about, one of my favorite clips from Trump was back in 2024 after one of his indictments. He comes out and he's like, this is being done by the same people who for the last 7 years have been conducting illegal psychological warfare campaigns against the American people. The amount of psyops flying around are just off the chain these days. Do you see any way to, I guess I don't want to say like limit it. I don't want more government to like fix problems, but do you guys recognize at least the problem with the media and their lies and just the psyops going on in general? Like, do you guys ever talk about that up on Capitol Hill? Like psyops?
Yeah, those of us that are paying attention, we absolutely do. I mean, like I'm John, as fast as I possibly can. Like, I'm trying to get rid of this thing in my life. Like, it is not a productive device. And like, I actually just laid out the plan for how I'm going to do that with my staff this week. And they basically like had an open revolt. But it's just, look, like, you spend so much time on this stupid thing and you don't focus on the things that are actually important in life. And whether that's your wife and your kids, or you end up in a doom scrolling loop instead of actually using that time productively to read a book or work around the house or, do tasks that you need. I mean, like, I'm constantly 250 to 300 text messages behind. I'm, a couple hundred voicemails behind. Like, the thing is just, it's a disaster when you infuse a interconnected 24-hour news cycle combined with social media algorithms. It's a way to ruin your life. And so I'm actually, like, the plan that I laid out is I'm getting rid of this thing within the next week. I'm going to a flip phone with no text plan whatsoever. and I'm just going to live my life in a completely different way. But I would tell you, like, there is not necessarily a government solution to all of this because of the way that the private media market works and operates. And I'm not just talking about our domestic media market. I'm talking about international media markets that are influencing the way that Americans see the world. I mean, look, it's an open secret at this point now. Like, TikTok algorithms are very different in the United States than they are in China. In China, they're used to edify their kids. In the United States, they are used to, tell a young boy that they actually really feel like they're a girl.
Yeah.
This stuff is poisonous. We've created a toxic environment in which to raise our children. And if we're not very careful and we're not very intentional with our brains, it's equally poisonous to us too as adults. And so the biggest thing that can actually be done in this is each individual American actually take charge of his or her own agency and just start living life differently. Kick this thing and kick these influences and kick the ability for these psyops to be run against us, and just get them out of your life. It's the only solution that I've tried to, like, take apps away or, do stuff on certain times during the day. Doesn't work. You end up right back into it the second that, you get delayed at the airport or something like that, or you're stuck in traffic, or you're just, on the couch in kind of a dead time where your wife and kids are doing something else. And then boom, you're immediately back into it. You're completely distracted. It's totally unhelpful. And it really does mess with the way that you see the world. And so take agency is what I would say, John.
Yeah. With not paying taxes, or with just
with getting rid of this device, maybe look, I am I'll tell you, I made my first, big pot of money my last year that I was in the military. I started a company on the side, and it really took off. And that first tax payment that I had to make, basically paid for a cruise missile. And I looked at it and I just couldn't believe, how much our government actually takes from the productive capacity of our citizens. And when it's not used properly, I hate property taxes. I fundamentally think that if you don't pay your property tax and you can have your property taken from you, you actually don't own anything. And private property rights aren't really a real thing. They're a figment of our imaginations. And so I want to see the tax regime changed in this country very substantially. I'm not going to do that as a freshman in Congress, but if we can be successful enough in our short time that I hope to spend up here, maybe in future years, we'll be able to start making a difference around the periphery like that.
We hope so. We're looking for a government official to lead our tax revolt for us. So maybe if you ever want to be that guy, let us know.
Well, if we can find a way for us to do that without getting arrested, I'm all about it.
Yeah, same here. Appreciate you, Congressman Harrigan. Thank you for coming on and being so generous with your time.
Hey, you bet, John. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed the discussion, and happy to be back with you anytime.
Awesome. Thank you.
See ya.
Oh, that was good. Very generous of him to stay on as long as he did. I think we only had about 15 minutes lined up, and that was 45 minutes. And, as hard as I can be on government officials, I like him. He's a very likable guy, and I do believe he means what he says. I want to meet him in person sometime. We'll have to line something, get him to come to a conference or something. But yeah, I did my best to grill him, but I thought it was a good conversation. Definitely. But anyway, yeah, I'm a half an hour over my allotted time for the day. So you guys, I hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll see you tonight on the Power Hour at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Do me a favor, hit that thumbs up. Let me see if there were any rants. I don't know if I remembered to save the rants today. I did not. So if there were any rants, I'm so sorry. I did not have those saved on my end. But I'll see you guys tonight. Hit the thumbs up and stick around on Badlands. We got a lot of great content here. So should be another good Wednesday.
Let's get started. real good.
Why they stopping me?